Have you ever dreamed of stepping into a place where history whispers through the walls, yet every detail is wrapped in modern comfort? I still remember the first time I visited a luxury ghost town in Colorado. The cold mountain air, the quiet streets, and the way every cabin seemed to carry centuries of stories. It was surreal, like walking through a living memory. These towns were once abandoned, forgotten by time, but now they welcome visitors seeking mystery, adventure, and a touch of luxury. Today, I'll take you on a journey to 5 of the most incredible ghost town resorts in the USA that you have to see to believe. 1. Dunton Hot Springs, Colorado. I still remember the first time I drove into Dunton Hot Springs. The winding mountain road felt endless, surrounded by towering pines and the crisp Colorado air that made me feel alive in a way only the Rockies can. I had read about this ghost town that had once been abandoned for decades. A mining camp left to time and decay, but nothing could have prepared me for the sight of it. The old wooden cabins, some leaning as if whispering stories of the past, were now restored with a charm that was both luxurious and hauntingly authentic. Walking through the town, I felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and wonder. The creaking of the wooden floors under my boots, the faint smell of old timber mixed with fresh pine, and the quiet bubbling of the natural hot springs made me pause and just breathe. I could almost imagine the miners trudging through snow-covered paths, their lives tied to the land, each cabin holding echoes of laughter, hard work, and survival. Yet now, these cabins were polished, elegant retreats with plush beds, antique furnishings, and private decks overlooking the mountains. The contrast was surreal, but it worked beautifully. I stayed in one of the restored cabins, a place called the Saloon Cabin, where every detail told a story. At night, the fireplace crackled while I sipped a glass of wine, listening to the wind whistle through the valleys. It felt intimate, like I was part of Dunton's long history, yet cocooned in comfort. For the first time, I understood what luxury in a ghost town could really mean. Not flashy, but a quiet elegance that respected the past while embracing the present. One morning, I ventured to the hot springs. The water was steaming, almost magical against the cold mountain air. As I floated in the spring, I couldn't stop thinking about the miners who had once relied on this land for survival, now transformed into a place of healing and reflection. It felt like a connection across centuries, a reminder that even abandoned places can breathe life again if cared for with vision and respect. By the time I left Dunton Hot Springs, I felt changed. It wasn't just a vacation spot. It was a story of rebirth, of a town that refused to fade completely. I realized that luxury here wasn't about opulence. It was about immersion, history, and a rare sense of being part of something timeless. I still carry the memory of Dunton with me, a ghost town that taught me how the past and present can coexist beautifully, and how sometimes the quietest places leave the loudest impressions on your soul. 2. Crystal Ghost Town, Colorado. I had always been drawn to the allure of abandoned places, their stories whispered by the wind through decaying walls. So, when I first heard about Crystal Ghost Town, nestled deep in Colorado's Elk Mountains, I knew I had to see it for myself. The journey was an adventure in itself. The road to Crystal was a rugged four-wheel drive-only path that twisted and turned through dense forests and steep inclines. As I approached, the remnants of the old mining town began to emerge: weathered cabins, rusted mining equipment, and the iconic Crystal Mill perched precariously above the Crystal River. The sight was hauntingly beautiful, a testament to a bygone era. Crystal had once been a bustling mining camp in the late 19th century, home to hundreds of miners extracting silver, zinc, and lead. By 1917, the mines had closed, and the town faded into obscurity. Yet, despite its abandonment, the spirit of Crystal lingered in the air, in the whispering trees, and in the still waters of the river. In recent years, a vision began to take shape to breathe new life into this forgotten town while preserving its rich history. Plans were set in motion to transform Crystal into a sustainable luxury retreat. The proposal included 20 luxury cabins along the Crystal River, a farm-to-table restaurant, and a range of outdoor activities like hiking, fishing, and skiing. The goal was to create a haven that honored the past while offering modern comforts to its guests. However, the path to revival was not without obstacles. In 2021, Gunnison County issued a stop work order due to unauthorized road improvements made by the developers. A fine of $12,000 was imposed, and several remediation requirements were set. Despite these challenges, the vision for Crystal remained steadfast, a beacon of hope for those who believed in the town's potential. As I stood there, taking in the panoramic views of the surrounding mountains and the serene flow of the Crystal River, I couldn't help but feel a deep connection to this place. Crystal was more than just a ghost town. It was a symbol of resilience, a place where history and luxury could coexist harmoniously. The transformation of Crystal Ghost Town into a luxury resort is a testament to the power of vision and perseverance. It's a place where the past is not forgotten but celebrated, where guests can experience the beauty of nature and the richness of history in a setting that offers both adventure and tranquility. 3 Camp V, Colorado. The first time I arrived at Camp 5, I felt like I had stepped into a different world, hidden away in the Colorado mountains. It's not just any ghost town, it's a place where history, art, and nature blend into something almost magical. Driving along the narrow dirt roads, with pine trees brushing the roof of my car and the cold mountain air filling my lungs, I felt my stress melt away. The anticipation of exploring a place that once thrived and then faded into silence made my heart race. Camp V was once a small mining settlement, like so many others in the Rockies. For decades, it stood abandoned, the wooden cabins weathered and collapsing, the streets overgrown with wildflowers and grass. Yet, there was something enchanting about its stillness. A story in every beam and every empty window. It felt as though the town was holding its breath, waiting for someone to bring it back to life. Walking among the restored cabins, I was amazed at how the owners had preserved the original charm while adding touches of modern luxury. Some cabins were converted into artistic retreats, complete with Airstream trailers, cozy studios, and outdoor spaces for creativity. Every detail seemed intentional. The textures of the wood, the placement of furniture, the quiet spots overlooking the mountains where one could just sit and think. I remember sitting on the porch of one cabin, feeling the cool breeze and listening to the distant sound of a river, thinking about the miners who had once lived here. How different their lives must have been. Harsh winters, back-breaking work, yet a sense of community that I could almost feel even now. The most memorable part of my visit was attending a small art workshop held in one of the cabins. The space was alive with creativity, yet deeply peaceful. Artists painted, sketched, and wrote, all while being inspired by the surrounding mountains and the ghostly history of the town. I joined in, feeling both awkward and exhilarated, but the environment made it easy to connect with the art, with nature, and somehow with the echoes of the town's past. At night, the town transformed into something almost mystical. The stars above the mountains were blindingly bright, and the quiet was profound. Sitting around a fire pit, sipping hot cocoa, I felt a connection not only to the people around me, but to the many who had walked these paths long before. Camp Fee wasn't just a luxury retreat. It was a living, breathing story of rebirth. It reminded me that even the quietest, forgotten places could hold immense beauty and inspiration. When I left, I carried with me more than photographs. I carried a sense of peace, a spark of creativity, and a deep appreciation for the way Camp V honored its past while creating a space that nourished the soul. It was proof that ghost towns, when treated with vision and respect, could come alive in the most extraordinary ways. 4 New Sky Ranch, Colorado. The moment I first set foot at New Sky Ranch, I knew I was somewhere extraordinary. Tucked away in the Colorado mountains, this wasn't just another ghost town. It was a place where history, creativity, and nature collided in a way that made you pause and take a deep breath. The road up was steep and winding, lined with pine trees that swayed gently in the mountain wind. By the time I arrived, my mind had already started to leave the chaos of everyday life behind. New Sky Ranch had a fascinating history. It started as a miners' settlement, a small community that thrived in the rugged Colorado terrain. Over time, the town faded, leaving only weathered cabins and dusty trails as memories of its past. But unlike most ghost towns, New Sky Ranch found a new life. Visionaries took the old buildings and transformed them into a creative retreat, a place where artists, writers, and thinkers could come to reconnect with nature, with themselves, and with the stories embedded in every log and stone. I spent my first evening wandering the property, exploring the restored cabins and the open spaces where workshops were held. There was a quiet magic to the town. The cabins still carried the echoes of their original occupants, the miners who once braved harsh winters and grueling work, but they were now filled with warmth, light, and the hum of creativity. Each cabin was different. Some offered private studios. Others had cozy fireplaces perfect for late-night writing or reflection. One of the highlights of my stay was joining a small workshop in a cabin perched on a hillside. Outside, the mountains stretched endlessly, the sun casting golden light across the valleys. Inside, the room was alive with creativity, with people sketching, painting, and sharing stories. I remember sitting by the window, sketching a cabin while listening to a gentle breeze outside, feeling a connection to both the present moment and the history surrounding me. It was as if the town itself was whispering stories, urging us to listen and create. Nighttime at New Sky Ranch was unforgettable. The stars above were brighter than I had ever seen, and the silence of the mountains was profound. I remember sitting on the porch of my cabin, wrapped in a blanket, feeling a deep sense of peace. It was humbling to think about the people who had lived here long ago and the town's transformation into a sanctuary for creativity and reflection. I could feel their legacy in the walls, the pathways, and the river that ran nearby. When I left New Sky Ranch, I felt more inspired than I had in years. This ghost town was proof that places abandoned by time could still have a soul, that history and creativity could coexist beautifully. It reminded me that luxury and imagination aren't about opulence, they're about connection, reflection, and respect for the stories that came before. New Sky Ranch was more than a retreat. It was an experience that touched the heart and lingered long after I had left. 5. Shaniko, Oregon. The first time I drove into Shaniko, I felt like I had stepped into a time machine. The long stretch of quiet highway led me into the heart of Oregon's high desert, and suddenly, the landscape opened up into a ghost town that seemed frozen in time. The sun was low, casting golden light across old wooden buildings, their shadows stretching across the empty streets. I remember gripping the steering wheel a little tighter, my heart racing with excitement and curiosity. Shaniko had a fascinating history. Once called the wool capital of the world, thanks to sheep ranching and the railroad. But as the economy shifted and transportation changed, the town gradually emptied. By the mid-20th century, Shaniko was mostly abandoned. A place where wind swept through dusty streets and tumbleweeds rolled lazily past old storefronts. Yet, standing there, I felt the presence of its past miners, ranchers, and townspeople, whose lives had once filled these buildings with noise and laughter. Walking through the town, I noticed how some of the buildings had been carefully restored. Shaniko had been transformed into a small, immersive ghost town hotel, offering guests a chance to experience history while enjoying modern comfort. The rooms retained their old-world charm, with wooden floors, high ceilings, and antique furnishings, but with cozy beds and warm lighting. It struck me how thoughtfully the town had been preserved. This wasn't a gimmick. It was a genuine restoration that respected the history. I stayed in a cabin that overlooked the main street. That evening, I wandered outside as the desert wind blew softly. Sitting on a bench, I imagined the bustling town in its prime, merchants selling wool, children running through the streets, trains arriving with supplies. Now, it was quiet, yet strangely alive. The quiet gave me space to reflect, and I felt connected to the people who had once called Shaniko home. There was a stillness that felt comforting, almost meditative. The next morning, I explored the surrounding hills and old ranches. The view was breathtaking: rolling hills, distant mountains, and wide open sky that seemed endless. I could almost hear the whispers of history carried by the wind. Back in the town, I enjoyed a cup of coffee in the restored saloon, listening to other visitors marvel at the place. Everyone shared the same sense of wonder, the same respect for the ghost town story. Leaving Shaniko, I felt a mixture of awe and gratitude. This ghost town had taught me that even places abandoned by time could be reborn with care and vision. It wasn't just about luxury or comfort. It was about experiencing history, feeling the presence of the past, and connecting with the land in a meaningful way. Shaniko wasn't just a destination. It was a story, a living memory of Oregon's past that invited you to be part of it, even if just for a night.